tonight's public meeting. I see about 15 people here in the room, and we have, looks like 12 people joining us virtually. If you're joining us here in the Richland Public Library, please note the exits right there behind Pauline and outside this door if anything were to happen. And for those of you who are joining us virtually, Colleen has added all the comment period materials in the chat, including the way to submit your comments. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. It's going to be posted to the events calendar as soon as we can. Tonight's meeting is part of a Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. It's a Class 2 60-day public comment period, and it's running through December 12th, so there's plenty of time to submit your comments. Tonight, we're here to discuss a proposed permit modification that will provide more operational flexibility for the tank-side cesium removal system, which filters waste from Hanford's tanks. We have our presenter from DOE, Richard Valle. Thanks for being here with us, Richard. And we have two ecology representatives here. We'd like to thank you for being with us. And so now we'll turn the time over to Richard to begin. And we ask that you please hold your comments and questions until the presentation is finished. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dana. Coming through okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, I see we have the slide deck up, so just again, want to give an intro. So as Dana mentioned, we're here to discuss a proposed permit modification. It's under a particular section of the permit, so the low activity waste pretreatment section, and then we're going to be talking about a particular unit, the tank side cesium removal system, or TSCR system, as you might hear. I'm Richard Valle. I'm a program manager in the Hanford field office in the tank waste operations division. Okay. So the first thing, if you've joined us on a few of these before, we always like to take the opportunity to discuss a very important process that is occurring on the Hanford site and will continue. So the direct feedlow activity waste, or DFLAW configuration, is something that we're gearing up towards and will ultimately lead towards the treatment of tank waste at the Hanford site here. Just to try to make sense of what's in front of us, I'll just walk through the graphic here. Starting at the AP tank farm, that's in kind of the middle, upper middle AP tank farm in orange. So that's a double shell tank system where we're going to stage waste for the DFLAW configuration. Then you see down and below a pop out for the you can see where it fits here within the direct feedlow activity waste configuration. But the purpose of that system is to remove solids and cesium from the liquid waste, thereby pre-treating it and allowing it to be then sent to the next stage. So we'll follow that orange line as it goes from AP farm TSCR and then to the waste treatment and mobilization plant. You see it stops at the low activity waste facility. That's kind of the teal color. So that's actually where the vitrification treatment is going to be occurring. So we'll be immobilizing the waste in glass, the pre-treated waste in glass, so that now it's a treated waste form. We talked about the glass form that's created during that process. That then goes up to the upper corner. You see in purple, the integrated disposal facility, accept containers of vitrified low activity waste for disposal. So that's kind of the process for the glass. There's still more on the page here. So if we go back to the low activity waste facility, you see a line exiting it. So as part of the glass making process, there are effluents or liquids that are created as a result. And so those need to be managed. Really, the volume needs to be reduced. So you see the effluent management facility in blue that evaporates the liquid effluent from the low activity waste facility. Volume is reduced, and then that then goes to the liquid effluent retention facility and effluent treatment facility, or LERC and ETF, as you might hear referred to. And that's the liquid effluent retention facility will provide that storage until it's ultimately treated at ETF. And that is the life of the waste in the glass making process during DFLAW. So we'll jump to the next slide.
We have a little technical difficulty we're looking to resolve right now, so we apologize about the delay.
Okay. And this kind of just rolls up what we went through at a lower level, kind of just in some succinct bullets. So we understand there's chemical and radioactive waste here at the Hanford tank farms. The U.S. Department of Energy will safely and efficiently immobilize that tank waste through, like we mentioned, the DFLAW or Direct People Activity Waste Program configuration. And as part of that DFLAW program, the system we'll be talking to at length today is the TISC, tank site cesium removal system. Its function is to remove solids and cesium from that liquid waste, pre-treating it so that it can be then sent to the waste treatment and mobilization plant WTP law facility for final treatment and in the glass making process. We're gonna wait for a little. Looks like we might have cut out on the presentation.
Yes, we apologize for those of you that are joining us in the room and online. We're experiencing a technical difficulty, so please take a little break. We're going to get this right up and rolling for you, and we sincerely apologize about the delay. Sorry, Richard.
Just not there.
So the presentation, I can share it out to the public and show in the room, but I can proceed with that if you like.
We're on slide 5 is what they're looking at, so. Just give it one more minute to see if it'll come back up on the screen. Does everybody here have the presentation in hand? Push from Michelle, okay. We'll give it one more minute, and then Richard, if you're okay, we can keep going and we'll just go off our hand copy in here, because it seems like they can still see it virtual,
I
online.
now have a presentation up virtual.
Yep, okay. You want to keep going?
Sure.
Okay. We're on slide 5 at the moment.
Okay, sorry about that, but I'll make a point to call out the slide that we're on, and so everyone online and then in person can follow along. So we left off slide 4, talking about the DFLAW program, the Direct People Activity Waste program, and then now we're jumping to slide 5 to kind of drill another step deeper, at least for tonight's discussion. So the regulatory framework that we're working under is, as Dana mentioned earlier, under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So there is a Hanford Dangerous Waste Permit. We're operating up to revision 8C at the moment, and that's issued by the Washington State Department of Ecology that as our regulator. And it governs the dangerous waste treatment, storage, and disposal for the Hanford site. For tonight's discussion, DOE and working with our contractor today, or for this particular area, Washington River Protection Solutions, we are the permittees, and as was noted, we're proposing a Class 2 permit modification for this particular section of the permit. Again, it's in the low activity waste pretreatment system operating unit group. That's operating unit group 1 of the permit. And as we mentioned earlier, the TISC, tank site cesium removal system or project falls under this LOPS operating unit group 1. So that's kind of the drill down of where we're talking to in terms of the permit. Moving on to slide 6, just given a visual, really where the TISC is located, but you can see what Hanford site located within the state of Washington. Hanford site's made up of a series of areas. We're primarily focused on the 200 area, which is right in the middle. And in particular, the 200 East area is where you see the TISC generally located, called out for you. Moving on to slide 7. Again, just get into additional detail and background. The TISCR system began pre-treating tank waste in January 2022. So it is an operational system. It is in use, and it's creating that pre-treated tank waste. And its purpose is to filter those undissolved solid material and remove cesium to pre-treat the waste again. In the figure that's shown there on slide 7, it's nothing that we haven't already seen or talked about, but again, just a little bit more clarity. So we have the double shell tank farm system, the AP tank farm. You can see the ones that are called out. These are the ones that are in use for TISCR operations. So waste makes its way to AP 107. AP 107 then feeds the tank side cesium removal system. You see the yellow transfer lines. There's the pre-treatment step that happens, and then that pre-treated waste is then routed to AP 106. And reject streams that are generated during the pre-treatment process are routed to AP 108. As part of that pre-treatment process, to remove the cesium, it uses ion exchange columns or an ion exchange technology. Really, that's a resin material that has an affinity there for cesium. The cesium gets loaded onto these columns, and then they become loaded with cesium. They are then swapped out and replaced with fresh columns as needed. You can see the TISCR ion exchange column storage pad at the bottom to describe what we're talking about. So as we load up those ion exchange columns, we'll place them on the TISCR storage pad and continue the pre-treatment process with fresh ones. And then, as we mentioned, in the grand scheme of the DF law program, that pre-treated waste then makes its way to the waste treatment and mobilization plant for vitrification, which has not occurred yet, but we have been operating the TISCR to generate that pre-treated material when it is up and operating here shortly. Okay, over on slide 8 now. The TISCR system. This is probably, again, just putting what we talked about in words on the prior slide. So the tank waste is transferred from AP 107. It makes its way to the TISCR process enclosure via hose and hose transfer lines. Those were those yellow lines that we called out in the prior slide. And then a very important point of emphasis for tonight's discussion. So for worker safety, there's really no man entry into the TISCR process closure permitted during waste processing operations. So that's important, and we'll call back on that in subsequent slides here. But the general arrangement here for TISCR is then shown still on page 8 here, still shown. There's different enclosures that make up TISCR. The process enclosures where we've been talking to, but then there's also an ancillary enclosure and a control enclosure. We'll focus tonight's discussion on that process enclosure. So on the next slide, this is the lowest we'll drill down to, but this is just if you were standing in front of the TISCR process enclosure there, what it would look like. This was shortly after installation, but you see there's 3 large bays, the 3 doors are closed, but you can make out the general outline there. That's where those ion exchange columns are inserted and removed upon loading of that cesium. And then to the side there, you see 2 smaller openings. That's where the filtration, the 2 filter systems are for this TISCR unit. Okay. Now on slide 10, and this is what you would see if you were inside the TISCR process enclosure. And the main takeaway here is just to show exactly how much is going on inside that process enclosure. Might be a little bit deceiving from the exterior, but then seeing what's in front of here, there's really quite a lot going on in terms of piping connections, monitoring equipment and such that become important for tonight's permit mod, proposed permit mod. Okay, and so on to slide 11. Important to note that the TISCR process enclosure does have secondary containment, and it's designed to contain a leak with all the necessary leak detection equipment. The floor of the TISCR enclosure is sloped, and you can see that there in the schematic that's provided. And it's sloped so that any waste that does leak accumulates in the low point, which has a leak detector and a pump to be able to notify and then manage any leak that's encountered. Okay. So really the purpose of tonight's discussion is to focus on slide 12, on slide 12 here. So the TISCR is a demonstration project that is currently operating, and we've learned a lot from implementing the system. One of the things that we've encountered during operation of the system is what you see there on the photo. So there are weeps and seeps, as we refer to them, at connection points. There's a lot of them, as we showed in the prior slide, but they don't really make their way, and they don't lead to a leak that will actually alarm, make its way to that slopes sump flooring, and then alarm, because as you can see in the photos, they typically just weep and seep and then solidify around those connection points. So conservatively, we've taken the approach to stop and address these leaks. We've done a lot of work to date to address the different connection points and try to make them better. But for the purpose of operating TISCR long-term, in the event that we do experience these weeps and seeps, we are proposing tonight that we would do exactly what's said here. So we would monitor the leak. Actually, that's the next slide. So really, this is kind of framing the problem statement, and then we'll move on to slide 13. So this is what we would be proposing because of that. So to allow for the continued waste operations of TISCR, we're proposing that we visually monitor these weeps and seeps that was shown to you on the prior slide, and document any of the changes in, in terms of volume or leak rate that would occur. The affected area would be addressed and cleaned up at the next appropriate maintenance outage, but we would still perform daily visual and video inspections to monitor those weeps and seeps. The second bullet there is really no change in the event that there is an active leak that alarms the system and is detected. It would still result in a shutdown of waste processing operations so that we could remove and address the leaked waste. And then while this is a big part of the proposed modification for tonight, we did take the opportunity to clarify additional information as part of the modification, the proposed modification, and then provide additional process detail as well as just correct editorial mistakes and such. Okay, I'm on slide 14. Actually, it's working. So, but still, I'm on slide 14. So again, to kind of wrap it all up and reiterate some important points, this is a Class 2 permit modification that's being proposed for the low activity waste pretreatment system section, that operating group of the permit. There are 3 particular sections or subsections within that part of the permit that have been modified as a result of today's proposed modification. That includes the unit-specific permit conditions, Addendum C, which describes process information, and Addendum F, which describes preparedness and prevention. And the full proposed permit modification and all the language is available to you on the Hanford Dangerous Waste. Has a Hanford Dangerous Waste permit change notice that's available attached to this meeting invite on the college's webpage. On slide 15, the proposed Class 2 permit mod has a 60-day public comment period. And as was mentioned earlier, it's open through December 12th. It's open currently, and it'll run through December 12th. We encourage you to submit comments electronically as preferred via the hyperlink noted there, but then snail mail is fine too, and that can be sent to the address listed below. I think that opens it up for the last slide, which was for any potential questions.
Thank you, Richard. And for those in the meeting and those joining us virtually, again, we apologize about our technical issue, and thank you to those who resolved that issue. We appreciate that. Now, some people join us via the phone only. If you're joining us via the phone, press *6 to unmute and answer your question. I'm not sure if we have anybody who's joining us phone only. So if you're on the phone and want to ask a question, you can go first. *6 to unmute. All right, I wasn't seeing anyone there, so we will move to the chat. Pauline, any questions in the chat?
We don't have any questions in the chat yet. Actually, Mia Burke. Mia, can you unmute if you want to ask your question to the group?
Hi. Yeah, I have multiple questions, so maybe you can put me back in the queue after I just begin. The document that was linked on Ecology's and Energy's websites, it's the administrative record document 30645. I didn't find any mention of weeps or seeps or any language around those changes, and it didn't include the usual red lines. I'm just curious if that's the correct document.
So we'll have to check on that, definitely. Weeps and seeps is maybe what we affectionately refer to at, but the permit section that does address it would be section C64. You'll see some text, like you said, it may not be redlined of what you're used to, but I think it's called here just waste being processed through mechanical connections, and it lists a few. So you may not see, you're right, you might not see weeps and seeps called out in particular. That was really to have the general discussion here as it's referred to.
Okay.
Or
Any questions here in the room? Please just raise your hand. Go ahead and speak. Right, not seeing anyone. We have two in the chat. Colleen, go ahead.
Okay, next in our queue is Dan Solitz. Dan, can you unmute your phone and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. What kind of temperature and pressure are we talking about? Is that Teflon tape I see hanging out of those joints? Did you hear me? Can you hear me?
yeah, sorry,
Can you hear
Dan,
me?
I think slide 12, correct? I hear you. You on slide 12 where you're talking there?
Yes, the temperature and the pressure, and it looks like there's some Teflon tape there. That's kind of a floppy job.
So I don't think I know those specifics. We can, if you put that in a comment, we can certainly get back to you. It was designed to a certain design temperature and pressure, and then we can provide you, you know, the operating design temperatures and pressures.
Okay, that'd be useful to know because it just might be condensate. I mean, there's just not enough information to tell.
So the typical operating temperature is our waste temperature, so that varies anywhere between what we've seen about 60 degrees to approximately 80 degrees for the waste temperature. And then the pressure on the system will vary anywhere between about I think it's about 85 pounds and down to about 35 pounds at the back end of the system. And we'll have to get back to you on the design temperature and pressure. I don't recall what those are.
I'm not sure, Dan, if you were able to hear that Matt Cutters, WRPS, Washington River Protective Solutions, and as part of, again, our contractors or permittees, so he was able to answer that. I'm not sure if you caught all of that, Dan.
So Dan, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers my question about the temperature and pressure, but I'm a little at sea as to why you're having trouble. Has anybody formulated a theory?
As in trouble as in audio, I don't think Matt had a mic, so if you had trouble hearing him.
No, trouble with the connection.
Yeah, so the mechanical connections we have, they're just a thread and mechanical connection. And over time, the waste will kind of weave or seep down through those threaded connections in the very small amounts that have that basically dried up that you can see as they are as that waste is weaving out of that threaded connection.
Does anybody have any idea why?
Yes, and it's kind of because we do pressure tests on these after we replace components, and we test them at the operating pressure, and just as a period of time, as the process runs, that waste has worked its way through that threaded connection. We have made changes to eliminate the threaded connections where we've been able to.
Okay, thank you.
So our next question is from Jerry Paulette. So Jerry, if you can unmute your phone or your microphone.
Unmute here and get off
There
camera.
you go.
There we are. And I'll lower my hand. Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and one is a follow-up to me. So the link from the notice document has the transmission of the permit proposed modification. There is no RCRA permit fact sheet, which usually accompanies a modification or as part of that. Is this a brand new write-up for this section of the permit, or is it indeed modification?
It is a modification, so that the current section exists, it's been modified. There are red lines, if they're not posted online, we'll have to check into that, but it is a modification, red line update to the existing permit section to account for this proposed changes.
They may be redlined. The difficulty is that there's no, if you look at the contents, it doesn't show you where to go look for anything that is redlined, and the scan through didn't. My interest is on substance side is what is the leak detection minimum alarm requirement currently, and how does it relate to what has been weeping, seeping, and accumulating? And secondly, how are the requirements handled for visual leak detection inspection addressed when there is no permissible entry?
Okay, so the weeps and seeps there has not been an instance where it's made its way, it's actively leaked to activate the leak detection alarm. So these, like is shown on the photo, they are weeps and seeps outside of where it should be out of the piping material, but they solidify as was noted and shown, and have not activated the alarm. So in terms of quantification, that's the quantification there, but. And then the third, or your
Well, I guess
question.
the first part of the question is, what would trigger the alarm? What is the minimum leak detection specification in the permit for triggering an alarm, and what kind of backup is there if there is no visual? Sometimes there are pits, etc., that have a visual inspection, remote visual opportunity for ensuring that there's no leakage from a hazardous waste treatment tank or piping in order to back up a single leak detection alarm capability. What is minimum leak detection here, what would trigger an alarm, and is there a backup system required in the permit? And I guess I should ask, where in the permit should I be looking out of the 100 pages here?
So can't quantify what the leak rate or volume that'll trip the leak detector alarm. It would have to make its way certainly to that leak detector alarm and then be in an appreciable quantity to activate the alarm. Again, that's not happening here with the weeps and seeps. And if you would like to put that in a comment, we'll get you the information on what activates the leak alarm in the sump. But again, that's not what's happening here with the leaps and seeps. And then, as you noted, that visual inspection performance will be performed during cameras because again, there's no manned entry into the TISCR process enclosure when it's operating.
So you may have answered part of my question here. So the leak detection is accomplished is at a sump for accumulation of a liquid. It's not based on any airborne or other detection close to the piping that's experiencing the problem.
Right, I'm correct. I would jump to slide 11 there. And if we could do the same, that'll show a schematic of that. So this is the TISCR process enclosure cutaway that shows the sloped flooring and it slopes towards the low point. And this is that leak detector and pump. An active leak would make its way again, slope to the leak detector alarm, shut down operations, and then allow for the corrective actions to address the leak. So the weeps and seeps that we discussed and tonight are not of an appreciable quantity that have made their way to the leak detector. We can see them because of the visual inspection that they have made their way. They wept and seeped out through visual inspection. But again, they have not activated the alarm.
So the leak detection is entirely based on reaching a quantity that could reach the sump. My last question then would be, in terms of worker safety and health protection, what is the procedure given the fact that there may be residues of waste on piping, and a leak detection isn't going to detect that in advance of re-entry? How do you handle protecting, and does the permit address protections for worker health and safety re-entering the process area?
So the weeps and seeps have been and will continue to be identified through the visual inspections that we have via camera. And so we would identify those as proposed tonight. We monitor them. And then at the next maintenance outage, so TISCR operates in batches. And so there is downtime for maintenance as we prepare for a subsequent batch. And it's during that maintenance outage where we'll perform all the necessary work planning that includes worker protection, health to adequately address the weeps and seeps, clean them up. That may include also addressing the engineering side of it if there needs to be, things need to be tightened or just replaced or corrected. We have the opportunity in those maintenance outages to address. And yes, they'll take into account worker safety as we plan that work.
I appreciate that, and I'll send an email asking for directions in the permit. Thank you. Appreciate your responding to that series of questions.
Are there any questions in the room? Any new questions in the chat, Colleen?
We did have Matthew Campbell's hand up for a minute, but I don't see it up now. So Mia Burke did have another question. And Matthew, if you did have a question, if you can raise your hand. But for now, Mia, feel free to ask your question.
Hi, thank you. So Richard, how often do the maintenance outages occur?
There's a maintenance outage after every batch. So we again operate in batches. And then we will perform preventative and or corrective maintenance, during, in between batches. So it just
But
depends on, go ahead, sorry.
how often does it occur? I mean, is it every month? Is it every 3 months? Every year?
We plan a campaign out. So a campaign is then the culmination of those batches to get us to a, target goal, of pre-treated waste. And so right now, we're in a maintenance outage. We're planning towards batch operations here shortly. I don't think there's a one, defined answer. Generally, we'll operate for 5 weeks.
25 to 30 days.
25 to 30 days, and then we'll take a maintenance outage to address anything and everything we need to. That includes, again, the preventative maintenance and corrective maintenance. So you can't really quantify that. It's just, we will plan, what needs to be done before starting the next batch operations.
I'm curious because that's the amount of time that if you find the leak on day one, it will be there, your weep or seep, it will be there for up to 30 days without anybody going in to do something. Is that correct?
I would say that as was noted in the slide deck, we might have glossed over, but we will monitor that daily, through the visual camera inspections. And if we notice a change, if it's worsening, then we will stop operations and enter a maintenance outage early.
But how much of a visual change would you need? And it may be difficult to see, right?
Well, we would rely on our operators and step through the process. I mean, this is being proposed today. We've monitored weeps and seeps that are there today, but in terms of monitoring for change, Matt, do you have a better answer on?
Yeah, we have multiple CCTV cameras. Oh, yeah, we have multiple CCTV cameras inside the processing enclosure that as we're processing, the operators are using those cameras to look around and look for abnormalities. Some of these have been identified with those camera inspections, and when they identify, we get shut down because conservatively, that's kind of where the permit drives us at this point. As far as, and we would continue to monitor, and we'll continue to monitor those. But as far as the leak worsening to where I guess where it's no longer kind of a weep or seep, it's kind of a steady stream. That would be the point where we would stop our operations.
I guess the concerning thing is that since Tisker started operations in January of 2022, there have been leaks, either reported by the DNFSB or others, October and December of 2022, March, April, July, December of 2023. There's been constant, like these weeps and seeps that you are calling them, in the system. And so my understanding is that Tisker is going to operate until AMPS is up and running, which is from the 5-year plan going to be in FY of 2029. So longer than the 5 years that is outlined in the permit. And so it's concerning that since it's been having these issues from the beginning, are we going to expect to continue to see these issues? And now you're not planning to go in and fix them until there are maintenance outages, unless you can visually see that they're getting worse.
Right, so a few things. Tisker is a demonstration project, and its purpose was to demonstrate the pre-treatment, the tank site pre-treatment capability. And so we're learning a lot from it. As we noted a little bit earlier, I'm sorry, I think there's an ambulance coming by. Okay, as we had noted a little bit earlier, so we have seen this, right? We have the photos to show what's occurred. You noted some of them. In each maintenance outage, we've taken the opportunity to address it. Number one, clean up the leak, but then also perform the necessary engineering. So that means potential tightening or replacing the connection points altogether with a better hard pipe connection, for example. So so the data points that you had noted early on, yes, they're data points. The TISC being a demonstration provide us that valuable data. We've taken the steps to address it at each opportunity we have. And I don't think, there has not been just another data point. In terms of a week or see, we have not seen one in,
Yeah, so we've so far processed a total of 8 batches. So we've so far processed a total of 8 batches. The last weeping leak that we had, well, last leak that we had was after we noticed that during batch 3. Since then, so the rest of the 5 batches, we have not identified any leaks in the system.
Okay, and I'm just curious if the DNFSB is aware of this this change in the permit mod, and if they are aware, if you know what their thoughts are about it.
unfortunately, I can't answer that. I'm sorry. I would say yes, but I can't definitively say that.
Okay, thank you.
So there is an additional question from Dan Solitz. So
Yes,
Dan
thanks
Sol-
again. Yes, thanks again. I have a question on radiological monitoring. Are you, I know that, of course, all that stuff in there is hot, and so it'd be kind of hard to tell if the signal was coming from the process, stuff that you're processing, or from the processes left in the weeps and seeps, but you must be doing some swipes and counting those swipes. Do you have any idea what the radiological data is on those weeps and seeps?
So I won't have the hard facts and figures on the radiological portion there, but I will say that you are correct. As we've noted, we've taken the opportunity, we've seen the weeps and seeps, we've taken the opportunity to address them, clean them up. And as part of that cleanup effort, we do industrial hygiene and radiological monitoring and characterization to understand what that leak was telling us and where it was coming from. But if you want I don't know if Matt has a value on radiological dose from a week or seep, but we probably ask that you have that as a comment if you'd like the formal response there.
Yeah, so I know that the dose that we have gotten off those, it's not any higher than the background radiation from the piping. And as far as the contamination levels, I can't tell you. I don't have any hard numbers. I'd have to go back and look at data in order to be able to provide any hard numbers on what the radiological dose rates for what the contamination levels were.
And Colleen, are there any more questions in the chat?
I don't have anybody else in the queue or in the chat.
And are there, oh, I see
So it's not a question, it's an answer, trying to be timely in our answers. So the question is what was the required leak rate? And by the way, this is Suzanne Dahl, the Washington State Department of Ecology. I'm the tank waste treatment section manager. And I'm looking at the online version of the permit, section C632, secondary containment and operation of transfer lines. And so the leak detection there, what the system's designed to be able to detect is a 7 gallon per hour leak can be detected within the hoses within 24 hours. And there's also probably a similar number I can find for within the structure, but still looking. I think it was you, Jerry, that asked the question, and then that I found that answer in section C632.
thank you for finding that answer for us. That was very helpful. Appreciate that. And I don't see any more questions in the room. Let's check the phone one last time in case someone has joined us via the phone. Press *6 on your phone to unmute, and please go ahead and ask your question. Oh, and Colleen sees a question on the chat.
Yes, it looks like we have one additional question from Jerry Paulette.
Go right ahead, Jerry. Thank you.
Would you put the section that Suzanne referred to in the chat so I can copy and look at it? I tried to jot it down quickly, but I couldn't. It would seem to me, and maybe this is a question for Suzanne, that 7 gallons per hour is an extraordinarily pretty darn high, very high leak rate. But that is solely, that would be the accumulation in the sump. Is that correct? Not, so a quantity that doesn't reach the sump wouldn't trigger anything. Is that
Right. That's right.
okay? I appreciate that. C62, thanks. Okay,
And we're working on getting that into the chat for you.
I see it. It's there. Thank you.
It involves me typing, Jerry, so that's the problem.
Thanks.
Any other questions in the room?
3632. 3632.
And thank you, Suzanne, and all of our ecology folks. Any more questions in the chat? No questions in the room? Richard, any final thoughts?
None for me. None for me. Thank you for the opportunity and the Q&As.
Thank you. And any final thoughts from ecology or our WRPS guests? All right. Thank you all for joining our meeting. Colleen, of course, has the materials in the chat. If you're here in the room, we have 2 QR codes right here. Please go ahead and fill out a survey and let us know how we can improve. Feel free to drop a comment. You can get online and put that in there at any time between now and December 12th when the comment period ends. We thank you very much for participating in our public meeting. Again, apologies about our technical glitch. Glad we were able to resolve that and move right ahead. And thank you. Have a very pleasant day.